Just a bit of background so you know who I am and where I'm from. I'm John Eldick. I'm an occupational hygienist with the Occupational Health Clinic for Ontario Workers. We're an interdisciplinary group of occupational health professionals, including doctors, nurses, hygienists, ergonomists, and our support staff. And we're funded through the Ministry of Labor, as all the other health and safety associations. But originally the money comes through the WSIB. Our board of directors are majority of labor representatives. We were initially set up in 1989, and I've been there ever since the beginning. So I've been there a while. Type of things we do, we see individual patients, just like a doctor's office. Any workers who think they have a condition that they're wondering, or if they think is work-related, can come. We don't do any treatment, we don't do any physio or anything like that. All we do is evaluate work-relatedness. We also answer questions over telephone, internet, through emails. We do presentations like today. We also visit workplaces. If the Joint Health and Safety Committee has an occupational health issue, the co-chairs invite us in, we can come in and help them with that. And some of those investigations actually turn into fairly complex situations that can involve medical, hygiene, ergonomics, all combined. Yes?
Since almost everybody here is probably federally regulated, we don't have joint health and safety committee, it's the workplace health safety committee. Is that
as long as there's a representative from management and from the workers who invites us in. That's the only. And whoever that group is, they're our clients. They're the people that we correspond with and send our reports. And we're for provincial or federal. There's no anybody who's a worker working on Ontario. If you're outside Ontario, we do the inquiries, or we don't visit. Okay, my background is in chemical engineering, and you might wonder why somebody in chemical engineering is talking about stress. But I've come to this topic through a number of ways. I'm also, I have a degree in epidemiology, and I teach at McMaster. But I've been working with workers experiencing stress in a number of ways. Through indoor air quality investigations since the early 90s, we've been including stress questions because stress causes the same kind of symptoms that poor air quality does. Also, we've been working with the Hamilton Fire Department since 1997. We've been doing an annual medical screening for them, for those that were at the Placemet fire, a big plastic fire that burned for a couple of days in Hamilton. And we started off with an open-ended question: were there any stressful incidents in the past year? Well, if you know firefighter work, that's the wrong question to ask. And there were lots of things, and just reading them almost caused me to have vicarious trauma. Some of the stories were phenomenal. And so through that, we've developed some scales to measure the type of stress that they experience. So first of all, is stress a workplace issue? Well, this is from a video by the Honorable Michael Kirby, one of the senators who works hard. And he estimated that 10 to 25% of Canadian workplaces are actually injurious mentally for the employees. And the government of Canada actually began the initiatives. Has anybody here heard Andrew Harkness today? This morning? Yeah. Okay, so you know a bit about the background of the standard. Well, the federal government was told that the Canadian economy wasn't competing well internationally because of our high absenteeism rates, and that was when you looked at what the most common absenteeism issue was people off on stress-related leaves. And they estimated up to $51 billion of direct and indirect costs to the economy because of stress, and that has been growing steadily. So the natural stress reaction in the body when you're under stress affects a large number of systems in the body. I won't go through each one of them. I think if any of you have ever been scared or stressed, you've experienced it firsthand. But some of these things can also cause long-term problems if the stress reaction is chronic. It works through the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. These are glands, endocrine glands in the body that link the mind to what's the physical part of the body, and they release stress hormones such as cortisol is the one that's often measured. There are other ways of measuring it too, different types of biomarkers. But the long-term effect of chronic stress is anxiety, depression, digestive problems, sleep problems, weight gain, memory and concentration impairment. And I'm sure there are other things that aren't on the list. And this is from the Mayo Clinic. Now, Stats Canada did a study of the population regarding stress. And they asked people whether or not they were stressed, and 27% of working adults actually said their lives were quite or extremely stressful. So they zeroed in on those people and they said, okay, what's causing the stress for the quite or extremely stressed people? And this pie graph shows you that while finances, time, family, and personal issues are also an issue, work was the predominant one, about 2/3. And if you think of your waking hours, about 2/3 of your waking hours are spent at work, so that just makes sense from an engineering time study perspective. Well, I see air conditioning is coming here. I do a lot of indoor air quality work, so I'm sensitive for ventilation. Okay, where's my stuff? Somebody moved. Okay. Actually, a couple of years ago, actually 2 years ago, we were going camping, and my daughter went to the library. She found a book on new books part in the library, and she wanted to get something for me to read. And she knew I was working with stress, so she got this book out by David Posen, and I thought, oh no, another self-help book on stress. That's the last thing I need. But that was the only book I had while we were camping, so I read it. But it was quite interesting. Dr. David Posen is a doctor in Oakville, and he's written a number of books helping individuals how to manage stress. However, this is a sequel to it, because what he was finding was the people he was treating were doing everything he said to manage the stress, but they were still being stressed. So he said, well, they've done everything they can. Now let's look at the workplace and see what's happening there. And I'm going to quote a bit from it, because he says it a lot better than I can. There are 2 ways to reduce stress. One is to get rid of what's there: exercise, meditation, massage, medications such as tranquilizing, diversion, distraction, humor, laughter, and play can all be helpful. However, if you don't eliminate the source of stress, overwhelming workload, unrealistic deadlines, a difficult boss, you can jog and eat broccoli till the cows come home and you won't get ahead of the problem. The stress will keep accumulating as fast as you can dissipate it. The best way to deal with stress is to get rid of what's there and eliminate the source. So in health and safety, we talk about the source, the path, and the worker. It's always best to deal with the hazard at the source. It's the same thing with stress. And he talked about his first book, which was a self-help book for the individual. The first book ran the risk of being seen as blaming the victim, although fortunately no one took it that way. This book runs the risk of blaming the organization for all the stress. The truth is somewhere in the middle. It's a shared responsibility. But I have observed that an increasing amount of stress in recent years has been company-driven, and organizations are doing precious little to own up to the damage they're causing on a daily basis. So if you're looking at something to help you ground yourself in this area, this is a very excellent book. It's written from a doctor who's experienced with people like yourselves in this area. And also he has many practical solutions on how to deal with it. One of them that I like is turning the email server off on Friday afternoon and not starting it up until Monday morning. I can see some people already reacting to that. So we also recently, in January of 2013, got the standard, and if you heard Andrew's presentation, you'll know all about that. The structure is the vision is to create a workplace that promotes the psychological well-being of workers and allows no harm to the workers' mental health. And the key drivers are risk management, cost effectiveness, recruitment and retention, excellence, and sustainability. And if you look at these are the sticks and these are the carrots. The sticks are, you don't want to be in the newspaper when one of your employees snaps and does something that's worthy of being reported in the news. Cost effectiveness, remember the $51 billion? There's a lot of money to be made doing looking after stress. Recruitment and retention. If you're a workplace that manages worker stress well, obviously you're more attractive to work at than a workplace that doesn't. And it's a mark of excellence, sustainability, to be able to manage your stress in the workplace well. There are strategic pillars. These can be looked upon as, if any of you are familiar with public health, there's primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. It's kind of analogous to the source, the path, and the worker. Primary prevention is getting to it before it starts, so preventing stress in the first place. Promotion is more secondary, where you're building people's capacity, wellness programs, relaxation methods. Resolution is when you have a problem and you've got systems in place to resolve those problems. And there are 13 factors that are included in the standard. They range anywhere from workload management to the protection of physical safety, health and safety issues in the workplace. I went to this 7th annual Mental Health in the Workplace Forum in October of 2013, and we heard someone from Bell. They have a mental health initiative. I see some of the people actually work for Bell, so you may know more about this than I do. But I thought what Mary Deacon said about mental health in the workplace was very interesting. A lot of organizations have the attitude that they can't go down this road because it leaves the organization vulnerable to criticism. They have to accept that this is a journey. They need to admit that the organization is not perfect, and we will make progress, but we also will make mistakes, and hopefully we'll learn from them. Another angle for promoting health and safety or mental health in the workplace is the work done by Martin Shane, who's a lawyer, and he's documented in 2010 and again in 2014. The first one was Weathering the Perfect Storm, or Trapping the Perfect Legal Storm. The second one was Weathering the Perfect Legal Storm. And what it is he's tracked how courts and adjudication panels and health and safety law and compensation law has more and more recognized that the employers have a duty to look after the psychological health and safety of their organization. And it's not recent anymore when I made the slide, but he actually stated that the CSA standard, while it is not a legal criteria, a regulatory criteria, it's the legal standard for arbitrators and judges to look at what's reasonable to expect from employers in dealing with psychological health and safety in the workplace. So, how would you go about measuring stress? You can see blood pressure is one of the things we think of when we think of stress. Also, Deming said if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. However, if you read his book, he actually says there are some important things in life and at work that you just can't measure. I like to use the example of Valentine's. I'm a bit of a statistician, so at Valentine's Day, if my wife asks me, how much do you love me? And I start saying, well, about 95% of the time, plus or minus 2 standard deviations, I'm in the doghouse. Like it's 100% or nothing. Like we don't try to measure those type of things. Then there's the issue of objective and subjective. For some reason, if we believe things when people aren't involved in giving the answer. So if we take your blood pressure, you're not able to fudge on that. But if we ask you how you're feeling, we're very suspicious that you have an alternative agenda, and therefore we don't trust your answer. So which is more scientific? Well, when you're talking about the mind, it becomes a bit problematic because we can't take an x-ray of your mind and say, you're angry. It doesn't work that way. If people do want to do a physical check, there's this nice little app that you can get from Azumio. And what it does is your cell phone has the camera and it can shine a light. It shines the light through your finger. And just like in the hospital when they put that thing on your finger to monitor your heart rate, this monitors your heart rate for about 2 minutes to measure the variability in your heart rate, which is a measure of stress. And based on that, there's a dial there that tells you how stressed you are. This morning when I did it, I was at 79%. I think I'm worse now. But it's a fun little thing to do, and I did it for a 40-hour period. Just I'm a measurement guy, so here's something I can measure. So at work I was around 17-18%. The commute, after the commute, it went up to about 30%. When I was doing dishes, it was even higher. It's not the fact that I don't like dishes. I think it's physiologically you're digesting food, and your physiology is actually more stressed than when you're not digesting food. And then I decided to watch The Sixth Sense by Bruce Willis. And right near the end, I saw this body drop on a screen, and it shocked me so much. I grabbed the thing and I tested myself, and I got 2%. So I thought that must be wrong. So I tested myself again, and it was 1%. So I got repeatability at least. But what it was, well, later on too, I like to go rollerblading at lunchtime along the Hamilton Beach there. They have a painted path. And it's nice and relaxing. So after I did that, I actually had 97%. And I thought that doesn't make sense. I'm very relaxed. It's a calm day. There wasn't much traffic on the path. But what this is doing is measuring physiological stress, which is different than mental stress. Sometimes they coincide, sometimes they don't. Here I was tired. It was the end of the night, and I had stayed up to watch this movie, and I was ready to fall asleep until I got scared. But really, my body was ready to go to sleep. My mind was scared. Here, my body was raring to go, but my mind was relaxed. And so sometimes you have a disconnect. Other times, I was stuck in a traffic jam, and I wasn't going anywhere, so I had 2 minutes actually to sit there and do the test. And I was quite high, and there it corresponded. So physical measurements may not represent what we really want to get at when we think of mental stress. And when you think about it, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, which doctors use to diagnose people with mental disorders, is based on questions. For instance, if this is the set of questions they ask if they're trying to screen you for depression. And there's some other criteria, whether it has changed the way you normally function in the last few weeks and things like that. But we're asking questions. So I'll step to another topic. Mental stress in the workplace is an issue that we found our stakeholders were having a hard time getting a handle on. So in 2009, when we were talking with them, we actually asked them, what kind of, how can we best help you? And they said, well, we've got tools for ergonomics, we've got tools for air quality, but we have nothing for workplace stress. So can we work together to build something? So what we did is this group, which was mostly representatives from unions, but also from worker organizations and a few academics who were interested in what we were doing from Waterloo and Carleton. we got together and we looked at the various stress questionnaires that are available, and we also looked at different orientations in dealing with stress. Stress often is looked upon as an individual issue. It's primarily, in primary prevention, you're trying to build people's resilience through coping and appraisal skills. In secondary prevention, we're teaching people relaxation techniques, wellness. Anybody here familiar with mindfulness? Yeah. That's a very popular technique in Hamilton at the university. At tertiary level, that's when people have a breakdown or some problem. That's when we're talking about therapy, counseling, medication, and support. But that's in the individual level. On the organizational level, the tertiary prevention is often EAP programs, employee assistance programs, or return to work for people who are coming back from a time off. Secondary prevention is often awareness, sometimes screening surveys, relaxation groups, things like that. But what we found is that there wasn't much dealing with primary organizational issues, the cause. And so our tools were designed to address that. So one of the things that we found was in North America, when people talk about workplace stress, they often talk about it from the point of view of psychology, which is thinking about what's going on in between your ears. So the focus is on the individual and how they're handling the situation and how they're responding in their behaviors. Now, the psychosocial perspective is a little more complicated. It's looking at what's going on between your ears, but how you also interact in your organization. And in Europe, the workplace stress is often looked at from more the psychosocial perspective than the psychological perspective. For instance, if you look on who was involved in setting up the CSA standard here in Canada, you'll find psychologists, but you won't see any sociologists or people like that. So the type of tools we put together are listed on our website. We have a guide which is about 100 pages long, which deals with various aspects of workplace stress, all the way from compensation to primary prevention. We have the survey that we use, and we often distribute it through SurveyMonkey, so it's easy to use. We have some YouTube videos, why do a stress survey, how to do a stress survey, and what to do next after doing a stress survey. We have posters and cards. I gave you one of those cards which describe the different issues that we measure. And we also have an app. That sheet of paper I gave you, we have an app that does exactly this survey, and you can download it for free for iPhones, Androids, or Blackberries. We're working on training materials with various partners, and we're also looking at taking this 100-page guide and reducing it to a 6 or 8 page item that will be a general introduction for workplaces. So the questionnaire that we base our tool on is called the Copenhagen Psychosocial Questionnaire. And the reason we picked this one was we looked at all the different surveys, and many of them are tied to a single theory of workplace stress. There's the job demands and control model, there's the effort reward, there's justice, there's appraisal and coping ones. What we liked about this is the people in Denmark actually surveyed all these and tried to put them all into a single questionnaire. The other thing we like about this one is it asks about symptoms also. A lot of times it's just exposures, so we have symptoms. And what we're really interested in is how the risk factors correlate with the symptoms. Because some stress, may officially be stressful, but maybe you have in your job been jail guards, for instance. They deal with violence a lot, and therefore they're trained to deal with it. And so a certain amount of violence for them doesn't keep them up at night. If you have that same amount of violence in a healthcare setting, that would be very distressful for those people. So you can see that just using one standard for all jobs is a little difficult, so we're looking at trying to correlate the symptoms. And the little card that I gave out has a list of all the psychosocial hazards that we deal with. There's 3 types of demands: quantitative, work pace, emotional demands. For work organization, how much influence, possibilities for development, how meaningful your work is to you, and how committed or engaged you are. With relationships, we're talking about predictability. When you come into work, you know what's going to happen. Recognition, being appreciated for and treated fairly. Role clarity, having a clear idea of what's expected and your objectives. Leadership and supervisor support. Trust, justice, and respect. We also talk about job satisfaction and work-life conflicts. And then we have a number of offensive behaviors: undesired sexual attention, threats of violence, physical violence, bullying, harassment, and discrimination. And if we had time, we would ask you to do the survey. It's a self-scoring one, so for instance, I'll just ask you to open it, and let's see which question is predictability. Questions 8A and B are predictability. And at your workplace, at your place of work, are you informed in advance concerning example, important decisions, changes, plans of the future? And do you receive all the information you need to do your work well? Okay. So you would score those 2, add them up, and then on the scoring sheet, which is here, you would circle your response for 8A and 8B, and it would grade it according to a color, and the color is interpreted there. That's one way of doing it. We also have an app that we developed with the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety. And like I said, it's downloadable in all 3 methods. And again, you take the question, you drop down boxes to give your answers. Then you get your results in a table like this. And there's a little eye inside the box. And if you click on the eye, then you get a list of ideas on how to address that particular problem. So this is based for an individual, just to familiarize them with what we're doing. The proper way to do it would be do a whole workplace together. Then we have an action plan at the end, which is based on learning, organizing, assessing, change, and evaluate. And we see this as a spiral. Before you do anything with psychosocial issues, you really need to get grounded and learn the basics, because this is a new field for a lot of people in health and safety. Organizing. Solving a stress problem in a workplace is never an individual achievement. It's always a collective thing that we have to work on together. One party can't solve somebody else's stress problem. You need to work together at it. Actually, a lot of stress is generated when one party tries to solve another party's stress problem. Assessing how to measure the stress. We all have checklists that we can send to people if they're uncomfortable with surveys. And once you've identified, with ours, we have a report that gives you the top 3 issues. And based on that, you can make some kind of an intervention in the workplace to try to improve things. And then it's good to evaluate it again, using probably a similar tool that you used in the first time to assess it, to see if the difference really stuck and whether it actually improved things. And when you do such an evaluation, you learn things again. And when you learn new things, you need to organize and assess, and it's a constant spiral of constant improvement. It's based on something similar to the ISO standards of 14, I forget what they are. Somebody you should know. Lambda? Yeah, let me check that. So how do we do it? First of all, we don't like the ones where people say, oh, we got an organization of 3,000 and we do an annual satisfaction survey, so we'll just plug it into that. That doesn't work. We're aiming at trying to get at least 80% of the people to respond, and you don't get 80% with most of those annual job satisfaction surveys. So what you want to do is do it locally. You want to start with one unit or one department and recruit people who will coordinate and champion the process. They need to be in it for the long term, because it's not just this questionnaire, that's just the beginning. Once you get the results, it's doing something with the results. So you need to get buy-in. If you have a union, to get them involved, the employer, establish a steering committee. That might be the health and safety committee, it might be the labor relations committee, it might be a brand new committee that you strike. To administer the survey, we'll talk about Billman's 5 contact administration system. But if you do it through the clinic in our Survey Monkey system, we're able to download that information, and once we download it, we have a template where we can just drop the data, and the report is produced immediately in 2 versions, a very detailed one for the committee and a 1-pager on both sides, which you can distribute to all the people who took the survey. So from our point of view, there's not much work to do. The work is the people in the unit or in the workplace who are organizing it, and then they have to take the top 3 issues, and that's when you start to begin the process of improvement. Okay, Don Dillman wrote a big fat book on how to maximize survey response. Talk about a statistician who has a very narrow topic. But anyway, there's a lot of good things you can learn from him. First of all, laying the groundwork, organizing, which we just talked about. But when you do a survey, he suggests that you start off with some pre-survey announcements. Try to get lots of people to endorse it so people realize it's important and they start to get in the frame of mind of thinking it. Then distribute the survey. Have some type of fanfare. If you give them time and space, and maybe bring in some food at lunchtime, make a splash. 1 week or 2 weeks later, you send out a reminder saying thank you if you filled it out, but if you haven't, please send it in. Another 2 weeks, you sound a little more desperate. Say, whoa, we've only got X%. We really need your support. It's voluntary, but please. And then finally, you give them the final ultimatum. If you want your voice heard in this, please, by this date, send in your survey. And so if you look at this is the process. You don't just throw them out and hope they come back. You're at it, you're nagging, you're really trying to get it, and it takes a couple of weeks to go through this process. So you want to plan it away from vacations and holidays and things like that. Yes.
Question, the tool that we used this morning in the opening ceremonies with the voting keypads, would something like that work with this kind of survey?
Theoretically,
to collect the
it could,
data, like kind of in one shot, or do we need
it's-
people to sit and think about it?
We prefer the sit and think. It takes people anywhere. If you just go through it and answer all the questions, it takes about 5 minutes to do. Generally, on SurveyMonkey, you can tell when they started and when they finished, and usually we find it's 10 to 15 minutes. But some people, it takes a long time because you're bringing up things that they are very deep for some people. You're asking about offensive behaviors and their experience and stuff like that. So you want them to have the time and the space to be able to think about it too. Some people will race through it and won't know it, but other people really want the time and the space to think about things. And at the end, we have a blank area where they can just write comments. And I'm always amazed at the stories I'm hearing. People are literally pouring out their hearts sometimes. So it's a little more than just clicking, I think, if you want to get real serious answers.
Would it not depend also, though, with the devices we used this morning, that gives you a global survey of a group of people.
Yeah.
But it would not provide, as an example, for somebody filling one out on their own. for them to see their individual results. You wouldn't see that through an instrument like we use this morning, but it would be that global.
Yeah, the app will give you your individual results.
Yeah.
When we use SurveyMonkey, we give
Yeah.
the global results.
And do people, like, I think with SurveyMonkey, you get the anonymous, like it's anonymous as well, right? But I think that's
You
part
have
of your-
some options. As a clinic, we never track the IP address, but you can track the IP address, which especially if people share computers, it's hard to tell who's done what.
Well, what I'm getting out of this is, if, as an organization, if you're looking to kind of address, like, I wrote down the top 3 issues from these surveys, it doesn't matter, like, you don't need to know who said what, you just kind of want to collectively find what are the top 3 issues as an organization and try to address those.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do. One of the reasons we prefer the anonymous survey is because, you know, if John's whining about his workload, you know, that's John. We all know John is a whiner. But, you know, when you anonymously survey the whole group, you can find out whether John is an abnormal person in the rest of the group who are just doing fine, and maybe he has some problems with his work organization skills, or whether this is a common theme throughout people. So, yes?
Is there any comparison between a written survey and an online survey in terms of response, like the anonymity
Yeah.
factor?
Generally, we get a better response with the paper. People take paper more seriously, generally.
Do they
There are
consider that to be
exceptions.
less anonymous, though?
Pardon?
Isn't that considered less anonymous?
Well, we construct ways that we collect the surveys. So we're an occupational health clinic bound by all kinds of confidentiality rules and things like that. So generally, we are able to establish that trust and that confidentiality if we handle the data. If you know, a worker or a manager says, "Here, do the survey and give it back to me," yeah, then we have serious problems. Yeah, establishing that trust is very important, and making sure that everyone realizes that there is confidentiality. Because one of the recent ones I did for a trucking firm, the truck drivers, the company health and safety person handed them out and expected them to come back in a sealed envelope, but he wanted them back to him. And yeah, there were a lot of issues about trust, and they were concerned. We had, I think, about a 60% response. And when we took it up with the health and safety committee, they said, yeah, we didn't know where it was going, but now that we see the method and how you're doing it, the next time I think you're going to get a better response. But, yeah, so organizing that ahead of time is very important. Okay, this is what the SurveyMonkey thing looks like, and again, it makes our life very easy, because if we do it on paper, we have to enter it, and we usually enter it twice to make sure that you catch your entry mistakes. And these things, it takes you 5 to 15 minutes to enter it. It takes us at least 5 minutes to enter it. So you can imagine if an organization with a couple hundred people, that's a lot of work. So, this is this is a heat map from one of the reports we did. And what it shows is the darker the color, the stronger the correlation. So here, stress symptoms are mostly associated with a lack of recognition. And we also have issues with predictability. And so the top issues for this workplace was lack of recognition. Also, we asked questions about physical health and safety issues. What we found when we did the survey at first, we didn't have those questions in there, and people said, you know, the fact that I'm dealing with physical hazard is stressful also, and therefore we asked questions about whether noise is adequately controlled or not, or interfering with the way you're getting the work done, and social support from the supervisor. So once you've got your top list of issues, how do you find ideas to try to resolve those? Well, there's actually a lot of resources. Again, it's best to do it in a group, not alone. And again, it's a conversation. Did you see this morning, Andrews? Yeah. It's the action guide for employers that accompanies the standard on how to implement it. One that we really like is the International Labor Organization's Stress Prevention Guidebook, and it's in checkpoint form. So it has about 55 topics in 1 or 2 pages each, and it describes the problems and it describes some possible solutions. So for workload, for instance, it says assess individual and team workloads through observation, discussion with workers, and determine whether change is necessary or feasible. And reduce unnecessary tasks such as control operations, writing reports, filling in forms, and registration support. This is my favorite. We recently got put under the Ministry of Labor, and we're finding a lot of bureaucracy is very cramping our time away from our clients. There's also a number of tools online from Europe, and this is one from Denmark that dealt with hospital issues and emotional demands. I was surprised when we did the truck drivers. Emotional demands was one of their top issues, and what we found it was tied to recognition. They're alone a lot, away from the office and the other people in the working in the workplaces. So feedback, coaching. The one I thought was really interesting was the possibility of withdrawing a place for privacy. If you think of a healthcare worker on the floor and something happens that's fairly traumatic, just allowing them to sit and in a room quietly by themselves for a few minutes to gather themselves before they go back on the floor and to deal with the next crisis, I thought. So a lot of these, some things will work in your workplace, some things won't, but it's just a bunch of ideas that you can consider. Another way of raising awareness in the workplace about these issues is the mental health first aid. Is anybody familiar with that?
It's expensive, so we wrote it up. We did that.
Did you take it for it?
No.
Oh,
I just
okay.
looked into it and I thought, oh, I can't justify this.
Yeah, it's a 2-day course. You can train people in your workplace to deliver it, which I don't know, you have to be cost effective. But what it does is teach you about the major mental illnesses, what they are, and how they manifest themselves. For instance, a panic attack, it states all the symptoms that people will experience, so that you're aware if someone in your workplace is experiencing these. What it also does is answer the questions like, what should I do? Because a lot of times the stigma is due to ignorance. People don't understand what people are going through, and so they shy away from it. So this allows people to understand, and it has this 5-step action plan, ALGEE, an acronym. Assess the risk for serious harm, first of all. Listen non-judgmentally, give reassurance and information, encourage appropriate professional help, and encourage self-help and other support. And what people who've taken the course have found is that it not only helps in the workplace, everybody has somebody they know who has one of these problems, and it helps in your relationships outside the workplace too, family, friends, things like that. If you're looking for the business case, if the $51 billion didn't convince you, the Laval Business Group at Laval University put together these booklets. Well, booklet 1 is about the scope of the problem, booklet 2 is what causes the problem, booklet 3 is solving the problem, and this is meant for CEOs and managers to get talking the business case for doing something about stress. Now, the important issue on stress is, are you ready to do something about it? And what I've done is taken the stages of change for individual behavioral issues and kind of generalized it to the workplace. So stage 1 is when people are not ready. They don't recognize they have a problem. What problem? It's just the way we do things in this line of work. It's always been that way, and it always will. you know, I pay you to be a little stressed. If you weren't stressed, I would think I'm not getting the money from you. Then there's contemplation stage. This is next when they're starting to think, hey, maybe things could change, but I'm not sure I'm prepared to change, but it's a bit easier just to let things go, but maybe, you know. And then the preparation stage is, yeah, things could be better, and I think it's worth the effort to try. Let's figure out how to do something about this. And then action is when you actually make a change. We're going to make the following changes and hope things improve. I'm glad we're finally doing something about this. But when you make a change, you got to make it stick. And so you need to make sure that, you know, it's not just a superficial thing and everybody's on a high and, you know, enthusiastic about something. 6 months later, have things really changed? And so you need some type of a system to also evaluate whether or not you're maintaining this new type of behavior. So sticks and carrots. Obviously, the $51 billion should be a big stick. Should also be a carrot, because if you deal with it, you're not taking on those costs. Risk. You want to read about your workplace in the newspaper. Liability. Again, Martin Shane's work. There have been 2 recent WSIAT cases that have recognized that chronic stress not being compensated by the Workplace Safety Insurance Act is against the Charter of Rights. So there was one case last year and one case this year. So there'll probably be more cases, and sooner or later we'll have to deal with that too. And if you look at Australia's experience, it might be interesting for you to see what percentage of compensation costs go to stress in Australia now. Worker retention and recruitment. Are you a good place to work? Excellence and sustainability. And in 1983, I went to an IAPA conference where James Ham was the speaker, and he really summarized it well. He said, law is the conscience of those who have none. It's really the right thing to do. Why wait till there's a stick forcing you to do it? Why not show some leadership and some initiative and take the high ground on it? So what can you do? Hopefully the spiral will help you. And if you're interested in some more of this stuff, we got together with the CCUHS, and there's a webinar on site. It's free. You can access it at any time and listen to everything that you heard here while you were taking a nap, so you remember what it was. Okay. Are there any questions, comments? Is anybody here involved in doing something about stress in the workplace that they'd like to share? No?
I have a question though. So I understand the whole prevention side of it, but let's say you have half of your claims for sick leave are due to psychological reasons, but you don't know how many of them are due to workplace or personal or both, because these are the types of, that's the type of data we're looking for to be able to then control them.
Well, the one slide I had actually showed that. For if they're off on stress, then they're probably in the category of being quite or extremely stressed. And here's the breakdown. Work 62%, finances 12, time 12, family 8, personal other. And these lines I think shouldn't be as distinct because they're fuzzy. If your work is poorly paid, then your work is related to your finances, which is related to your family, which is related to your time.
Aside from sending them to a third-party assessment, we just kind of want to get a sense of, you know, what's the reason of the psychological leave? Is it personal or workplace or both?
Well, sometimes it's these things.
So there's
The chances are 2/3 of them are work-related and 1/3 are non-work-related, if you agree with that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Anyone else? If not, thank you very much, and enjoy your afternoon.